Every year, there's a few crops that make you think, yep, I'd grow that again. And then there's others that are absolutely not worth the effort. In 2025, a handful of crops absolutely carried my garden, and they weren't always the ones I expected. So instead of talking about everything I grew, I'm focusing on the crops that actually earned their space in my small family garden. The crops that showed up, fit my schedule, and produced real food. These are the crops I'd grow again and why. Let's start with paste tomatoes because they were the backbone of my 2025 harvest. This year I harvested about 180 pounds, which blows my mind considering how little space they take up. To put that into perspective, this one crop accounted for a huge percentage of my preserved food for the year. What really makes a difference is how I grow my paste tomatoes. I prune them to a single stem, grown vertically up a trellis, which helps keep them productive without turning into a jungle. This also makes harvesting easier, it increases airflow, and it helps keep the garden from feeling overwhelming in the midsummer. Variety matters here too. I grow Amish paste and bread and salt. They are both meaty, large paste tomatoes, making them perfect for preserving. From these tomatoes, I was able to create enough pasta sauce, salsa, tomato soup for my family for the whole year. This is the type of long-term payoff I like to see from a crop. When I think about effort versus reward, this is one of the clearest wins in the garden. Would I grow them again? Absolutely, but I'm gonna cap it to this amount next year. This year helped me find what the upper limit was for my space and energy. More than this wouldn't improve our lives, it would just add stress. As my boys get older and eat more, I can always reassess, but right now, this feels right. Potatoes were another strong performer this year. I harvested 68 pounds, which is almost double what I got last year, and that feels like a huge win. The biggest change I made this year was pest protection. I grew Yukon Gold and russet potatoes, and for once I actually protected them from hungry rodents. Last year I underestimated how much damage they could do, and I paid for it in yields. That alone made a noticeable difference from last year. Potatoes take up dedicated space, but they are dependable, versatile, and absolutely worth growing. They are also one of those crops that can make a meal feel complete even on busy nights. My family absolutely loves twice-baked potatoes, roasted potatoes, and gnocchi. Would I grow them again? Yes, absolutely. For me, there's no too many potatoes. The exception to that is the red thumb fingerling variety. They sound charming, but in practice, they don't earn their keep. Digging up all those tiny potatoes was a pain in the butt, and their flavor did nothing to impress me. I'll stick to bigger, more satisfying varieties in the future. Cucumbers were one of the biggest surprises this year. I harvested just over 26 pounds from one single plant. It honestly feels a little unreal. Every time I picked from it, I expected the production to go down, but it just didn't. I grew it up a trellis using the same variety I planted last year called China Jade, in the same spot and in the same soil. I honestly don't know why it did so well this season. And sometimes gardening is just like that. Would I grow it again? Absolutely, changing nothing. This is exactly the kind of low effort, high reward crop that I love. Carrots were a huge turnaround crop for me this year. I harvested almost 47 pounds this year compared to the 8 I harvested last year, which feels like a completely different outcome. This came down to a few key changes. I got the timing right for a fall harvest and I thinned them appropriately. And during that critical germination week in the heat of summer, I used a sprinkler on a timer to help keep the soil moist. That 1 week window can make or break this crop. I also grew most of my carrots in my raised beds this year because carrots prefer the loose soil that's in those beds versus my heavy clay. Once I stopped fighting the fact that I have clay soil and worked with it, this made a huge change. Once I had that all lined up, I finally had the space and conditions carrots needed to thrive. Would I grow them again? Yes, and I actually want to expand them this year. Right now, I grow most of my carrots in the fall. I would like to add a spring crop so that I can preserve some ready-made meals earlier in the year. This feels like one of those crops that still has a lot of room to grow in my garden plan. Green beans, on the other hand, were a little bit chaotic this year. I harvested about 22 pounds, which is a significant drop from last year. They were grown on 2 arch trellises that go over my garden path, and the slow summer heat really set them back. When they finally did take off, they produced well, but the birds decided that they should pick off all the baby pods for themselves. It felt like a daily race between me and the birds to see who could get out there first. Even with the losses, green beans still landed in my top 7 crops for the year. Would I grow them again? Yes, absolutely. We love green beans. And the kids actually eat them, which matters a lot to me. Any crop that gets eaten without serious negotiations gets serious points. I'm just going to go into next season with a better plan on how to keep the birds out. Cherry tomatoes were another crop that I was happy I made space for this year. I harvested just over 17 pounds, and while that doesn't sound massive, they are incredibly reliable. They filled in the gap between larger harvests, and they gave us something fresh to eat almost every day. My favorite variety is Sweet Million, and they never disappoint. They produce loads of sweet, beautiful cherry tomatoes that produce all season long. These are the tomatoes that will disappear straight out of the garden. Would I grow them again? Yes, without question. They are easy, dependable, and they are always worth the space. Onions were a quieter success this year, but still an important one. I harvested almost 46 pounds, even though I dealt with some pretty serious allium leaf miner damage. At one point, honestly, I wasn't sure how much I would end up with at all. What helped was the variety I planted. I planted Alyssa Craig onions that naturally get big bulbs, and I planted a ton of them. I planted 176 onions, so even with the losses, I still ended up with a good crop. This was a case where volume buffered against setbacks. Would I grow them again? Yes, but with some adjustments. I'd like to plant fewer onion plants next year and free up some space for some more nutrient-dense crops like spring carrots. The goal moving forward is efficiency, not just quantity. My hope is that with better pest protection, I can maintain a consistent yield without needing such high numbers of plants. Looking back at 2025, it's clear that a small group of crops did the heavy lifting. They weren't always the flashy or trendy plants, but they were dependable, manageable, and they fit both my space and my season of life. And that's how I ended up growing 520 pounds of food from my garden. Not by growing everything, but letting the right crops carry the garden. In the next video, I'm flipping things around and talking about the crops that absolutely did not perform this year. Talking about what struggled, what failed, and what I'm reconsidering for the future. And honestly, that's where some of the biggest lessons live.